Hello and welcome to Africa Here and Now. I'm Martine Dennis. Today, I'm delighted to be speaking to a bright young middleweight fighter who also happens to be the grandson of boxing's most revered figure, Muhammad Ali, of course. Nico Ali Walsh, welcome to Africa Here and Now. It's really good to talk to you. Now, clearly you're following in something of a family tradition. You're the third Ali, aren't you, to get into the ring? But let me ask you about your grandfather and what was his reaction? Was he encouraging when you told him you wanted to fight?
Yeah, he was, at the time, he was the only one in the family really encouraging me because my parents didn't want me to go down the path of boxing due to the health risks behind it. And just, it's a dangerous sport, probably the most dangerous sport. So they didn't want me to do it, but he kept me motivated, and he was like, keep going, keep doing it, keep going.
What was the conversation like with him? Because I've read that he was failing, and the Parkinson's was quite advanced.
Yeah.
When you had this decisive conversation with him, tell us about that moment.
So with Parkinson's, it's so weird because like one day he'll be talking clear, like it was back in the, like he was back in like the 90s or the 80s. He'd be just talking clear. And then the next day he could be back to, not being able to speak at all. So we would just find a middle ground. We would find a way to communicate. And the particular day that I think you're talking about where he kept me going was he wasn't doing well that day in terms of speaking. And so I just held his hand, and he would squeeze it when he was telling me yes, and he would just not do anything when it meant no. And I just went through a series of questions, and I was trying to urge him to get me to quit boxing because I knew it was going to be like a hard road, but every time I tried to sway his decision to get him to squeeze my hand to say yes, I was like, do you want me to quit? And I was looking for any sort of squeeze or anything, and nothing was there. And then I was like, okay, do you want me to keep going? And then he would squeeze extremely hard on my hand, and I was like, damn, well, I gotta keep going now.
And okay, so your grandfather was keen for you to box. I've also seen an interview with your mother, Rashida, who said that she was not at all keen on you going into the ring because your older brother is also involved in fighting, doing MMA, right? Mixed martial arts.
Yeah, he got into that just recently, just a few years ago. He joined the fighting club, but of course onto the side of like mixed martial arts, which is like, it's so much different than boxing, the kicking, the wrestling and everything. But yeah, they weren't too happy with that either.
Your mum also said that she was quite surprised. She thought that you might make a career in film, for instance, because I think you'd studied film and business at college.
Yes, you know what you're talking about. Yeah, yeah. They just didn't see me going down the path of boxing, but I was just drawn to it just for the aspect of legacy and everything, and my grandfather. And growing up, everyone, like normal kids, I would say, growing up had like superhero t-shirts, like they had Superman and Batman to like look up to, and my superhero was my grandfather. So I was like, I want to be like this guy. I don't want to put on a cape and fly around. I'd rather be in a ring and fight like that guy. And that kind of just stuck with me as I got older, and I was like, I just want to do that.
All right, so what sort of age did you actually start seriously boxing?
I would say everything I do, I take very seriously. But I started, like, my first day walking into the gym was when I was 14. And I just had big dreams from that moment. So that was 10 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you went pro in 2021, am I right?
Yes. I've only been pro for 3 years now, which is no time at all.
All right. But you're doing quite well. You're a middleweight, I understand. And
yes.
Your famous grandfather was a heavyweight.
Yes.
Do you study his fights? Do you try to emulate him in the ring? Do you try to be a boxer like he was?
Oh, not at all. I don't try to emulate him at all because like he would do things wrong. He would do things that would get me yelled at, like, putting your hands down or like dancing and just like laying on the ropes, and he would just do stuff you're not supposed to do. So I don't watch him to emulate him. I watch him for pure entertainment. But I've seen all his fights. I would see all his fights with him growing up. But especially now I could see boxing things that he's done very well. And I've seen all his fights and I still watch them now.
And for your debut fight, I understand that you actually went into the ring with a very, very special pair of shorts. Tell us about those.
Yeah, no, it was so weird. My pro debut, everything happened so fast. This feels like a lifetime ago, but for my pro debut, back in the day, back in my grandfather's time, everyone would wear white trunks with black trim. And that was kind of like his thing. But it wasn't just his thing. It was like Sugar Ray Robinson would do it. Like all the old guys would do it. So I loved these shorts, but it made me think of my grandfather. So I said, I'm going to wear white and black shorts for when I fight, but they're going to have like Nico on it. I'm going to make him mine. So I was with Everlast at the time, and I wanted Everlast to make me the shorts. And I was getting ready to leave for Tulsa, which is where I fought. And my trainer said, hey, just in case Everlast doesn't make your shorts in time, because everything was last minute, he said, bring a pair of white and black shorts that you can wear just in case. And I was like, I don't have any other pair except for like my grandfather had a pair of his trunks at my house. I said, I'm not going to actually wear these, but I'll bring them just in case. And I went to the fight, and it turns out my shorts were not there. And the night before the fight, I pulled out my grandfather's trunks and I had to try them on, and they fit. And I ended up getting to wear the trunks that were made for him.
It must have been very special indeed. It must have been quite emotional.
Yeah. No, it was crazy. It was the fact that I just felt like it was very much destined to happen, because I wasn't planning on doing that at all. I was not going to bring the shorts. But yeah, it was just very, very weird. It was destined to happen, I think.
So let's talk about the other Ali who's been in the ring, and she's now retired, isn't she? This is your aunt, Laila Ali. Has she given you many tips about fighting?
She would help me a lot in the amateurs, because it really is the same. The mentality is the same in the amateur, the pro. It doesn't matter where you are. If you're fighting an Ali, they treat it pretty much the same. And she would tell me back then that you get the best version of your opponent, because everyone wants to be able to say that they've beaten an Ali. So if you're fighting a C-level fighter, just expect them to be a B-level fighter come fight night. And that's how it was in the amateurs, and that's how it is now in the pros. In the pros, it's actually even worse, but that's how it is.
Does it ever get to you in a bad way? Does it ever upset you, the fact that you probably can never, ever be introduced or spoken about without mention of your grandfather, your very famous, your iconic grandfather? Does it sometimes burden you?
Yeah, it is weird. And I grew up getting very upset about that. Just being, before I was just Ali's grandson, I was like, hey, this is Muhammad Ali's grandson. That title makes me so sick, even now, even having to repeat it. But now I've kind of created my own path with boxing. Like, I'm nothing like my grandfather with boxing, and I've created my own path. So now, like everyone says now, people recognize me on the street and stuff. They'll say Nico. They'll be like Nico or Ali. Like, you can call me Ali, because Ali's such a powerful name. I don't just think of my grandfather when I hear Ali, because Ali's one of the most common names actually in the world. So, but yeah, I'm my own person now, which is amazing. But yeah, it took some time for me to get used to, escaping that shadow.
Right. Okay. Because a lot of the kids or the relatives of famous people often struggle, because you're always going to be compared. I mean, do you find that people are expecting you to be a boxer, to be a fighter like Muhammad Ali, your grandfather?
Of course. Yeah, my first fight, I had so much, I still have so much hate and scrutiny, just in my career as a whole. People expect me to be my grandfather, my first pro fight, and that's just not the case. Like, nobody's seen the development of someone's boxing career. We're used to seeing the stars at the top, or them right before they're about to get at the top. I was kind of in the limelight when I was at the bottom, where I'm trying to get up now. So nobody's used to seeing that. So they expect to see my grandfather, and they're never going to see him. He was. I don't care if you're Floyd Mayweather. You're never going to fight like he did, because he was, definitely one of a kind. So.
All right. And so I've asked you about, your boxing technique. And as you can tell, I'm not exactly terribly knowledgeable about boxing. The last time I spoke to a professional boxer was about 40 years ago, and it was Frank Bruno.
Oh, wow.
Obviously, Muhammad Ali is so much more than a boxer, actually. I mean, he's an iconic figure, perhaps one of the most impressive figures of the 20th century. I mean, his activism and his pursuit of social justice and things like that. Does that kind of impact you? Is that something that you try to emulate?
That's the only thing I try to emulate from him, honestly. His boxing skills are amazing. He's my favorite boxer. But I don't try to emulate that stuff. I try to emulate to a T how he was as a person, and I just feel like that comes natural to me, because that's the kind of person I am. That's the kind of person, just my family, a lot of people in my family are just like that. And that's what I try to emulate, just the social justice aspect of his life, the humanitarian aspect of his life, the way he just treated people as a whole. My family's very spiritual. My family's Muslim, just like he was, and we're very, we're just strong believers in how you treat people. And that's a lot more important than boxing to me. Just because of, we just feel like this life is so fleeting. You get so swayed with like money and cars and just crazy stuff that you got to like kind of stay grounded and stick to those core values. So I'm trying to do that. I'm trying my best.
In many ways, you've answered the question I wanted to ask you next, but I'll persevere anyway.
Yes.
Because we are talking during Ramadan, and of course that's the Muslim holy month. I think you've explained really that your faith really does influence what you do in the ring and how you live your life generally.
Yeah, no, boxing is weird, because boxing brought me closer to my faith, and I feel like that's a question I wish you could ask my grandfather, because it's weird. I'm seeing a lot of fighters nowadays. I'm seeing a lot of Muslim fighters nowadays just doing outstanding things and getting stronger in their faith as their fights progress. And I just feel like fighting in general, whether it's boxing or mixed martial arts or anything like that, fighting is like, people die in the ring. It's unfortunately it's not normal, but it's not out of this question when it does happen. And I feel like that aspect of being in a life or death scenario really brings people closer to a higher power. And I feel like that's what it's done to me. So I've just gotten closer, stronger in my faith since turning pro. And this month especially, you mentioned it's Ramadan. So this whole month, from sun up to sundown, no food, no water, that brings you even closer to your higher power. So, after this, I'm going to train, and it's tough training and sparring and running and doing all this crazy stuff without having to drink water and without having to eat. But stuff like that, it humbles you, and it brings you closer to your faith.
So it does require particularly mental strength. You've got to have quite a bit of fortitude, haven't you, to do what you're doing, particularly when you're fasting?
Yeah, no, boxing is hard enough. Boxing is hard enough. The stuff that I do in training camp is hard enough. Adding on top of that, no food and no water is extremely hard. It makes it extremely hard. But anything's possible. Every people are capable of doing, crazier things than that. So it's definitely humbling. But you think of during Ramadan when you're fasting, you think of like how blessed like I am to have access to water and food whenever I want, because people all around the world don't have that same luxury. And yeah, it's just a humbling experience.
Now we've kind of we've mentioned the downside, if you like, of the sport, and that is the danger of it, the physical danger, and I'm sure that we can see pictures of that terrible injury that you sustained in a fight where you dislocated your shoulder. Tell us about that, because it looks absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, it was pretty awful. That whole experience was the worst pain of my life, and going through it, I was just like, oh my God, this won't end. But yeah, so not in my last fight, but the fight before last, I was fighting and I was doing very well, and then my shoulder came out of its socket, which never happened to me before, and I didn't know what was going on, and I was trying to figure out like mid-fight like what to do, because when your shoulder comes out of your socket, and mine didn't just come out of the socket, it tore off.
Oh
So
my
like
goodness.
you could see the bone popping out. It wasn't fun. It wasn't fun. But when that happens, your hand locks into one position. And unfortunately that position for me was down. So I was trying to block and I couldn't bring my hand up to block. It wasn't physically possible. So I was just eating shots on this side of my face, and I didn't know what was going on, but I had to like get my bearings together in a matter of 10 seconds because, I'm in the middle of a fight, like a serious fight. But I ended up winning the fight by unanimous decision. And right after the fight, I had to get surgery. And it was just such a long, lengthy process. It was just very, very tough, very tough.
And I'm just imagining what your mother's reaction was.
Oh yeah, no, my mom was freaking out. My dad was freaking out. People watching, like, because it was on ESPN and it was broadcast on TV. So I don't know if people noticed, like, I was hiding it. So like for 3 rounds, it was out and I was fighting with one arm for 3 rounds. But I was hiding it. So people didn't notice until the last round of the fight is when I started trying to punch it and knock it in. And I started jumping up and down, because at that point, it was too late for them to I didn't want them to stop the fight. If they saw that serious injury, they would have stopped the fight. And I just didn't want that to happen. So I waited till the last round. Then I was like, let's get it going. But that didn't work, of course. But I ended up winning the fight, which was awesome.
Well, that is really awesome. But you're a young guy with everything at your disposal. You've come from a really sort of supportive and comfortable family. Why have you chosen boxing? Couldn't you choose something less dangerous physically to pursue?
Yeah, the average boxing story is people coming up from a bad neighborhood and getting themselves strong enough to fight and make it to the top and get their family out of that neighborhood. That's the average boxing story, and that's great. That's not my story, and that wasn't my grandfather's story either. My grandfather didn't grow up in a poor family. He grew up in a middle class type family, same as me. And his love and his drive for the sport is what pushed him forward. And that's the same with me. That's just what I feel with boxing. I never want to live comfortably with I could have chosen the safe route of a desk job, but never in my life will I, want to work a desk job, because my dream was boxing since I seen my grandfather. So I wasn't going to deviate from that.
Okay, but right now I'm talking to a 24-year-old who's fit and healthy.
Yes.
How much time do you think you're going to give this boxing career of yours?
I don't know. I'm relatively young in comparison to like speaking career wise, because like a lot of these boxers start when they were 8 and they have the baggage of when they were 8 years old up until when they're 38 or however long when they stop. So that's 30 years. I don't have that same problem. I started when I was 14 and I turned pro when I was 21. So I don't have a lot of baggage right now. I have all my faculties, of course, still I'm blessed to have. And, I'm going to have to see where my career goes, but there's no stop anywhere in the near future. But I will know when that time is approaching.
And what's your ambition then within boxing?
I need to make it to the top. I need to be a world champ, and then once we get there, I'm sure my goals will open up even more. But that's the ultimate goal is to be world champ. And if I had any other lesser goals, that would be doing me a disservice because I put in too much work to limit myself from that. That's the pinnacle of boxing, is to be world champ, and to stop anywhere before that, I would just have been wasting my time because I do so much to get to these fights. So I need to make it to that pinnacle.
And when you are training and then getting ready for a fight, do you feel that your grandfather's presence, do you feel your grandfather's encouragement?
Yeah, it's very weird. It's like boxing for me is not like it is for normal people. It's like a spiritual journey. Like I feel just, because that was his thing. His thing was boxing. So every time I am boxing, I feel him. And especially when I fight, I feel him because my grandfather was the reason that my family's very, very close. But I think that's because of my grandfather. He brought us all together for whether it was Thanksgiving or his birthday or something. Everyone in my family would come together and hang out when it was something going on at his house. And that stopped once he passed away, of course, because we stopped going to his house. But that is back again now for my fights. Everyone in my family comes to my fights now. And so I've kind of brought everyone back together. So that alone is a journey, a spiritual journey. And my mom and her twin, they feel his presence, during my fight weeks and in my fights. And it's just a crazy experience.
It seems I've looked at some of those amazing photographs of you when you were a kid with him, and you seemed exceedingly close.
Yeah, definitely. No, we were very close because he lived in Arizona. I live in Vegas. It was only a 3-hour drive, something like that. So we were always seeing him, and he was always coming to Vegas for fights and just fun stuff. So yeah, no, I would see him all the time, and that was the only grandfather that I've had, because my dad's side of the family, like a lot of his family had passed away long before I was born. So that was the only grandfather that I had.
Nico Ali Walsh, thank you very much indeed. We recorded that chat with Nico Ali Walsh on March the 11th. Please remember to subscribe to the Africa Here and Now YouTube channel, where you can find all our past episodes. You can get us on all the major audio platforms as well. We're on the socials, Insta, Facebook, etc. And don't forget the website. Again, you can catch up with all our episodes. Plus, there are some very interesting blogs that have been written by some special guests. AfricaHere&NOW.com is where you'll find it all. My email is martine@AfricaHere&NOW.com. Get in touch. Our original music is by Emmerich Adam. Anne Busby is our producer. Simon Elliott put the show together. And my thanks to our guest, Nico Ali Walsh. And as ever, my thanks to you for your company.